To call to order the June 16th, 2014 meeting of the Richfield HRA. The first item of business is approval of the minutes from the regular HRA meeting of April 21st, the special concurrent HRA City Council work session of April 22nd, and the special HRA work session of May 19th. Does anybody have any corrections or changes?
I'll move the approval.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, we've approved all three sets of minutes. The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda.
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Okay, we've moved to approve the agenda and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the agenda stands approved. On tonight's consent agenda, there are two items, but Commissioner Rubenstein would like to have one of those items pulled for discussion, letter A. So the only remaining item on the consent agenda is item B.
Yes.
I move the agenda as amended.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion for item B? Then all in favor of item B on the consent agenda, please say aye.
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 All of, John, did you want to read them before we?
No, that's fine.
All right, thank you. Now going back to item A, John, did you want to present that one?
Yes, thank you, Chair Supple. Item 3A tonight is consideration of an authorization to reduce the original tax capacity of the City Bella Redevelopment Tax Increment District due to homestead market value exclusion. And I'm just going to read the brief explanation here. In 2011, the legislature adopted the homestead market value exclusion, which revised the tax calculation for homestead property. As a result, this reduced the taxes that homestead properties pay and also reduced the tax increment generated by properties that have been homesteaded. In 2013, the legislature adopted a fix which would allow cities an option to reduce the base in the TIF district and lessen the impact on tax increment districts that contained owner-occupied housing, therefore resulting in increased tax increment. In order to allow the HRA to reduce the original tax capacity, the City Council was required to pass a resolution authorizing them to do so. The City Council did adopt this resolution on May 27th with a vote of 5-0. The reduction will result in an increase of increment in the amount of $3,411 for the HRA to use for administration and qualified redevelopment activities, and an increase of $10,231 to the note holder for payment of the pay-as-you-go note. I guess in layman's terms, the way I would say this is that the state of Minnesota, at the legislative level, made a decision on property taxes. Traditionally and historically, property taxes have been the domain of counties and cities, not of the state. When the state did this, there were unintended consequences because they're not as well versed in property taxes that they weren't foreseeing. One of those unintended consequences was that TIF districts all over the state of Minnesota weren't able to meet their obligations. For example, in City Bella, we have an obligation to provide City Bella with a certain amount of tax increment, and when the state took this action, we weren't able to meet that obligation. So cities collectively, through the League of Minnesota Cities, lobbied the legislature to create this fix that's mentioned in the staff report that allows us to, only for purposes of tax increment financing, to value the properties as if they didn't get this homestead value exclusion. For all other purposes, the homestead value exclusion goes into effect. The homeowners that would be affected by this, their taxes won't change at all as a result of this.
That means the homeowners at City Bella, correct?
No. This is the homeowners
All Richfield
of all of Richfield. Any homeowner in Richfield whose you're right. Any homeowner in that TIF district whose property is homesteaded, they got a reduction in their taxes. So that reduction will remain in place how their taxes are distributed out is changed by this. In essence, the county ends up getting less, and the TIF district ends up getting more so that we can meet our obligations. This is something that came up on City Bella because the note holder, which is a bank that can't remember exactly which bank it is now, they had inquired of us, and so we had gone through this exercise and determined that both the HRA and the TIF note holder would get more funding through this. Since this time, we're now going to analyze all of our TIF districts to see if something similar would be the case.
That was exactly one of the reasons I wanted this discussed, because I wondered if this was going to expand to others who are involved with TIF, because we do have other housing, I believe, that have received TIF.
Right. Any TIF district that has residential properties that could be homesteaded should be affected in the same way. So we are going to be analyzing
I
that.
thought it would be important for people who are in the viewing audience to be aware of this and make sure that they keep on top of this. Surprise, surprise, your taxes change and you don't know why, et cetera.
But again, with this,
But it looks like a win-win situation.
their taxes won't change at all. It's just how the tax money is distributed.
Yeah, how it's distributed, so we're getting more.
And we're getting more. That's what I say. It's a
That's what's
win-win
really possible.
situation.
Yeah.
But it's a touchy subject in Richfield, TIF, and I wanted to make sure that everybody understood this was a positive for the community.
Yes.
Did you have any further questions?
No.
I'll move the motion.
A second.
It's been moved and seconded to pass the motion item A on the consent agenda. All in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, then we've passed that resolution as well. Item 4 on our agenda is a resolution approving the Fifth Amendment to contract for a private redevelopment between the Housing and Redevelopment Authority and Best Buy. Mr. Stark?
Yes, thank you. The executive summary in here is pretty brief. I'll read it, but then I'll offer some additional explanation. The Housing and Redevelopment Authority is asked to approve this Fifth Amendment to the contract for private redevelopment between the HRA and Best Buy in order to ensure that the HRA does not collect more tax increment for administrative fees and the HRA Housing Trust Fund than is allowed by the TIF Act. And there's quite a bit of detail in background, but I think it would just be easier for me to explain it. When the Best Buy, the original contract for private development was approved in or around 2001, the amount of money that the HRA was going to be collecting for administrative costs and for our housing fund were stated in an absolute dollar amount. So that it was a dollar amount that was stated. Through the settlement of the acquisition of properties for the Best Buy property, the part of the settlement was that the value of the property went down, and as a result, the amount of tax increment being generated went down. Now, the HRA can only collect a cumulative 25% of tax increment for administrative costs and for our housing fund. What really should have been stated in the contract was that we would collect that 25%. What was stated, again, was a fixed dollar amount. The reality is that since that time, because of the settling the lawsuit and because of changes in market value, the amount of increment being collected is actually less than was anticipated. And so we've been collecting this fixed amount of money that really exceeds the 25% that we're allowed to collect. And so this is an action to fix that and to put it back in relative terms rather than absolute terms. So I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah.
And I would say that Best Buy's legal counsel, Bill Griffith, is here as well if you would have any questions for him.
I'll move the bookkeeping action.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any further questions or discussion?
I think that Mr. Stark gave us a very clear understanding of what this is all about. It's just a matter of fairness.
Thank
Right.
you, Best Buy, for being here.
Yep.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. All right, then we will move on to item number 5 on the agenda. This is a consideration of an agreement with the Cigna Design Incorporated to develop a wayfinding signage system for the Lakes at Lindale area in an amount not to exceed $35,000.
Yes, thank you. In March of 2013, the HRA approved a connectivity plan developed by Short Elliott Hendrickson, or SEH, for the Lakes at Lindale area. I would note, I believe that Cigna Design was a subcontractor to SEH for some of that work. Part of that plan included a recommendation for the development and implementation of a wayfinding signage program. Cigna Design, which is an environmental planning and design firm, it's here, partnered with SEH for that plan. Subsequently, HRA staff requested Cigna submit a proposal to develop a wayfinding signage system for the area based on the plan's recommendations. Staff is recommending that the HRA approve the agreement with Cigna for the development of a wayfinding signage system for the Lakes at Lindale area. And we do have Frank Hickey from Cigna here. I'm not sure if he wants to add anything or if you have any questions of him. I would just note that what's being considered here isn't for the actual signs themselves. It's for the plan, it's for the designing. We want to make sure that we do a very thoughtful job in doing this direction for folks. The reason we got here, we had found that there were so many independent things that have been developed at the Lakes at Lindale area, and they're not all highly visible from the public area, that A, these things were not really coordinated very well together, and B, the public wasn't aware of many of them. You know, when you think about things like the Kirchbeck Sculpture Garden, it's just a phenomenal site. But if I had to guess, I would say maybe 5 to 10% of the people in the community even know of its existence. So this is an effort to, again, bring people to the site, help people get around the area, and with that, I would take any questions.
Madam Chair?
Go tell.
I was very fortunate to be able to go on the walking tour of this when this project first started, and we started to figure out how should we be putting things together. And this is where I want it to go. And I mean, this is really exciting for me because I think too, as we move here, we saw when we were out talking with SEH and Cigna, it was wonderful to talk to them about other cities and see examples and stuff. And we thought about, wow, if we can get this down right here in what is the heart of our city, think about Cedar Point Commons and other areas when we get a lot more done on Penn Avenue and things, how this will be a blueprint to move around the city. So everything's consistent and very nice and updated and everything. So I'm looking forward to the next piece of this.
I have a couple questions. John, was this the second contract? Was the one that involved the early study and the walking tour another contract that I didn't remember?
That was a contract with SEH to do the study. They brought in Cigna for a small portion of it as their subcontractor. But yeah, this is kind of a step 2 in a 2-step process. Well, actually, it's a step 2 in a 3-step process. The third step would be then to actually commission the creation of the signs and have them put in place.
So what's the timeline on this?
We worked with Frank on a timeline. I'm not sure. I think we had asked the question late last week, so I'm not sure if the timeline is in what you have before you. But maybe if Frank wants to approach the microphone. Yep.
Well, thank you, too. It was a lot of fun working with the group and the stakeholders and the people from the community when we looked at the original planning that we were doing with the engineers. The scope of that work included, the curb cuts and lighting and a variety of other environmental factors that are a little bit out of the scope of what we talked about. But we talked about the idea of pedestrian, vehicular connectivity with bicycle routes and the whole mix of how people not just arrive and depart, but pass through, or people that actually live here and how they will interact with the surroundings. So the whole mix of the report, we're not just going to take it for what was written. We'll work with staff on what wants to be adopted, how you want to phase that over time, how our design with what we come up with will work with that phasing, and how it can be implemented or phased into lakes, the lakes area and but beyond that, so it works with the overall city. That's our hope. So the idea of timing really has to be tied to when I can work with staff. I'm very flexible with that. I'm ready to begin next week. But the overall scope of it is probably 2.5 months if we went aggressively, I would say, with that, but we can extend that out.
I have another question if I could.
Okay, go ahead.
So, John, the infrastructure things that were referenced, the curb cuts and the ability to get from place to place, is that something that the city is coordinating with some of their projects, like those things they're doing on the roadway in Lindale? Is that?
Yep, absolutely. It's two different things are happening with regards to that physical infrastructure. One is the city's going in and on our dime making some of the improvements right now. You'll see some of those. You'll see a pedestrian crossing going into place later this summer at around 63rd and Lindale, I believe. And that's going to have the pedestrian actuated crosswalk signal. So that's an example of something the city is going out and doing on our own. But then as developments like Lake Winds or Lindale Gardens come in, where we can have them implement some of the facets of the plan in their project, that's going to be happening as well. And that is something that the Cornerstone Group is going to start on this fall. Some of the bike routes that go back along the lake shore on Richfield Lake, those will be occurring. So it's both. It's both the city getting out in front and doing some of those, and then working with developers to do others.
And will the timing be such that the infrastructure will be done before signs are erected and people start trying to get around?
I would say most. Hopefully we will continue to see redevelopment up and down Lindale. And so just as an example, properties north of Lindale Gardens, or there are some properties along the crosstown at Lindale that might be future redevelopment sites. We won't be ready to do anything on those until they get redeveloped. But everything that can be done, either because it's in the right of way or because there's a pending development project, should be done in the next 18 to 24 months.
Okay, we had an additional question.
Two questions. Number one, we went through a pretty exhaustive process with SEH, and probably you were involved with it too, in terms of what we want. So I certainly hope that we're not going to be reinventing the wheel and using what came out of those workshops and community input, et cetera. That's number one. Number two, what you're just talking about, John, and as I walked into the City Hall, there's the big sign talking about all the street reconfiguration and rebuilding. And, is this really the right time to do it when 66th Street is going to be all torn up for a year or more? I don't know what the timing is on that, but I just hate to see the way MnDOT has done things, that 6 months after a project's done, they're tearing it up again. So I really wonder about the timing on this.
Yeah, and Madam Chair, Commissioner Rubenstein, we did have that conversation with our Public Works Department, and they feel like there are some improvements that you're exactly right. There are some improvements that if 66th Street's going to be reconstructed, you wouldn't want to put in things like curb cuts or things in the roadway itself. There are others that are behind the curb, for example, some of the signage that they think would be fairly easy to pull out during construction and reinstall afterwards without a lot of risk.
I put it in the first place until after, before construction.
Yeah, and a lot of it just depends on the timing.
Yeah.
What we want to do is make sure that what is installed in the first place is robust enough that it meets its goal. You don't want to do it so incrementally that there's no impact. But that's a very good point, and that's something we were very conscious of and going to be working with.
Put it in once and don't tear it out and then reinstall it. It's another expense, it's another inconvenience for people who are walking around in the area. You know, we've been without it for a long time. Yes, it would be nice to have it, but I just can't see tearing things up twice and the cost of replacing them when you know that you're going to have to do it.
Sure. Yep. We'll
My-
keep that
my
conversation
opinion.
going.
Any other comments or questions? Well, we have the agenda item before us. Did anyone want to take action on it?
I thought was it moved? I'll move it. I'll move approval of the agenda item.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Okay, the motion before us is to approve the agreement with Cigna Design Incorporated to develop a wayfinding signage system for the lakes at Lindale area in an amount not to exceed $35,000. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. The next item on our agenda is the HRA discussion items, and Commissioner Gotel had 2 items she wanted to bring up.
Yes, today I was fortunate enough that our council rep sent an email to me about the Cura group that does at the University of Minnesota at the Carlson School of Management.
They're at
held
the
a-
Humphrey Institute.
Though this was at the, no, it was at Carlson
Oh,
School of Management, and the speaker was Arthur Nelson. Do you know of him? He's
No.
written 26 books on metropolitan council trends. He spoke specifically around housing, and of course, it's a pretty hot topic for us right now. He is the director of the Metropolitan Research Center for the University of Utah, but in July 1st, he'll be in the University of Northern Arizona. He spoke a lot around some of the same things that ULI has also talked about, but what's happening in what he called the megapolitan areas, and Minneapolis being one of those because of our economy that churns up things and how we are pushing the rest of the world with all these different areas. One of the things, of course, I asked again was about housing, and one about senior housing, because that's been a lot of discussion around senior housing. And his thoughts on senior housing were that we needed to be looking at ways to make buildings a lot more flexible for the future, because the average lifetime of a building is up to 100 years old, and we know that the baby boomers will move through those houses, and that housing, and especially if you're talking about stuff that's specifically rated for seniors and has those amenities, it's not necessarily workable for others. So again, it would be interesting to see what architects, if they'll take this on and start thinking about buildings very differently. They also talked about different ways of density and more housing sharing, and how our new majority will be what the minority is now, and in 40 years that will be the majority of people. So white people will be in the minority, is what they're saying. And those folks haven't had the opportunities that we have. They will not have as much home ownership, so there will be a lot more homes that are on the market that won't sell in 40 years because of this.
Well,
Again,
that'd be rentals, yeah.
yes, they may be rentals or other such things, or people won't be able to sell them. The other thing I asked about is, we have a lot of seniors in our homes still, although some are moving out, but some of them, they can't afford to move out, right? So, I don't know, I had a challenge to our community development director that we have a wonderful program called Kids at Home that was developed here through some really great brainchilds. There's a program, I guess, in Roseville that is helping seniors move out of their homes. And I'm wondering if some of our staff would have time to go look at that and see if Richfield could help some of our seniors who really probably want to move out of their homes but don't think they can, overwhelmed, or don't think they have enough resources to make it, and probably need to. And it opens up a home for a family. So my challenge is to let's do a Kids at Home for the seniors.
Well, we'll absolutely take a look at that.
Okay.
We're friends with the folks up in Roseville, and
I'm
we'll,
sure you
we'll
are.
find out what they have to say.
Yeah, so just a lot of information and food for thought, and I think I might pick up his book. So,
Was that both your items?
yeah, that was both my items.
Is there anything else that anyone would like to bring?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't. I have
Oh,
one more.
okay,
Sorry.
go
sorry.
ahead.
Oh, one more item. We were, several of us were at the Wood Lake Nature Center this past week there was an open house on 66th Street reconstruction, and we're just talking about the reconstruction of 66th
There
Street.
was an open house.
Yeah, well, it was specifically for those folks whose homes were highly impacted. And in fact, I see that Marty Kirsch, the chair of the transportation, was here, and he was at that meeting as well. There were two meetings, one in the early afternoon for those who could make it, and one in the evening.
Oh, yes.
They talked about the section of 66th Street from 35W interchange to York. And the reason specifically they were looking at that is because some of those folks had not been able to make some of the other open houses. So they had one specifically for them because some of the impacts are pretty large in some of the schematics that we're looking at currently. It's not been a decision made, but it's pretty impactful, and I can tell you that you had some very upset people. In the reconstruction of that, it's anywhere from 17 to 20 homes would actually have to be taken out to make 66th Street much wider. And there's a lot of concerns about making it wider because we're highly impacted by all the traffic that dumps down off of Crosstown already.
Yes.
So there's a lot of discussion going on about that, about, where we really want to go with that. And I just want to alert the housing and redevelopment, because housing is our piece, right? And that's a huge loss of income to the city. And, we need to take it very seriously, and maybe we want to get into that conversation, and maybe as a discussion item, we want to have that brought so that all of us understand it more, because I think it's highly impactful. I know that there's a study session with the transportation in the city council on July 8th or 9th. Do you recall which one that is? One of those is coming up. It's on the website.
Will the HRA be invited to that study session?
The transportation meeting.
Anybody can come to those.
Anybody can come to those, but it would, and it'll be
Send
announced.
us a
as well.
notice, yeah.
Send us a note. Can you send a note, please?
Yeah.
Okay, to let them go, because this is highly impactful to everybody.
You bet.
There are businesses along there too. The biggest swath that will be hurt are those folks from 35W to Penn Avenue. And it is very impactful, and we need to think about whether we really want
Those
to
are
do
nice
that.
homes.
I know if we really want to do that, or like we've done in other parts, like with 76, some of that's done differently. It's not all the same. So we need to
There were
we
quite
need
a
to look
few
at this.
homes taken when the overpass was rebuilt. It must have been 2000 or so when that overpass was done, and there were 1, 2, 3 homes taken, if I'm not mistaken, at that time.
Mhm. But there's a lot of conversation. The homeowners were very upset. And
rightly
it's their
so.
home, so they
Yeah.
were passionate about it, and rightfully so. So
I got a somewhat different perspective from Jeff, the transportation engineer, at a meeting today where he said it was about 50-50. Some were concerned and wanted to know what was going on, but others were anxious to be considered to be bought out and just wanted to know when.
well, a few of them were that way. I guess I saw more of the other when I talked to them one-on-one. But we'll have to see as we move forward what we really need to be doing. I mean, it's a lot of homes and income to lose
Yeah.
as well. We have to think about that.
So, Mr. Stark, you'll keep us in the loop on what's going on?
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other items for discussion? All right, then we'll move on to the executive director's report.
Thank you. The only thing I would want to report is that Lake Winds Co-op, their grand opening is scheduled for June 28th.
What
So-
time is that supposed to be?
I haven't heard a time.
I've got a wedding that day, so
Yeah,
wanna make
I
sure
don't
I
know that
can-
they're going to have any kind of ceremony, actually. I haven't heard anything about
really?
a ceremony. I can double check that, and if there is going to be some kind of ceremony, I'll make sure that people know the time, but I have not heard that.
Yeah, is this just a soft opening then, and they're going to do
No,
something?
I think the soft opening is actually happening before the 28th.
All right.
But on the 28th, I think it's open as business as usual, and but I've been in the building a few times in the last week, and it's just phenomenal. I think everybody's going to be very pleased
Oh, wow.
with Lake Winds.
Exciting. I haven't been over there yet. Excellent.
That's it.
All right, thank you. And we also need to still deal with claims and payroll.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, we've approved the claims and payroll. Seeing no further business, we call the meeting adjourned.